Exit Readiness Podcast. My name is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners, and I'm excited to have my very good friend Jack Quarles as our guest today. Jack is an accomplished author. He's a speaker. He's a consultant. He's authored 3 Amazon bestsellers: How Smart Companies Save Money, Same-Side Selling, and his latest book that we're going to talk about today, Expensive Sentences. Jack speaks to business and leadership groups in the U.S. and internationally. He's an expense management consultant, and in that role, he's saved businesses really tens of millions of dollars. He's co-founded successfully multiple startups, currently serves on 2 boards of directors. He has degrees from Yale and Northwestern Kellogg School of Business, and so he's a really smart guy. And best of all, he's married to Linda, and they live in Toledo, Ohio, with their 2 wonderful daughters. Welcome, Jack, to the podcast. Let's start with some of your comments about the book. Why did you write Expensive Sentences?
You know, Pat, you mentioned that I've been in the field of expense management for the last 2 decades, and that's true. A lot of that's been internally as a procurement lead for big companies, but also as a consultant and in some other roles. But, you know, that field, procurement and expense management, it's all about making buying decisions, about making good decisions with your resources at work. And that's a skill that's important for all of us, of course, and it's important at work. It's also important at home. But what I saw sort of firsthand in the trenches in terms of how companies make decisions is that it didn't always go with the logic and the process and the facts. Decisions were often derailed by ideas that would pop up in the decision-making process and kind of draw you toward them like with gravity.
Good decisions based on sound logic, processes, and facts are essential for a successful exit plan. And one of the key components of a successful plan is maximizing value, and which requires logic, process, and facts. So, Jack, help us understand how business owners can increase value and profitability by recognizing expensive sentences.
Well, Pat, you've talked to me before about the importance of EBITDA or EBITDA, I don't know how you pronounce it, but that all-important earnings number, right, your profitability.
Yes.
And, of course, in the procurement field, that's sort of what we're focused on. We're focused on getting the right value for the purchases so that more goes to the bottom line. So let me give a quick story. As for one of the first times that the expensive sentence kind of reared its head, and I recognized in my work. And this is when I was working for a national financial services company. It's a very well-known name. And I came across a vendor that was about $1 million a year. And I went to the owner of that vendor that was the human resources because I didn't know what it was. And she told me, oh, you know, that's our background check provider. And that kind of made sense because we had a lot of call centers, and everybody that joined those call centers had to get a background check if they were viewing sensitive and financial information. And the person said, you know, I know what you're trying to do there, but you don't need to worry about it. So I said, okay, well, what am I trying to do, and why don't I need to worry about it? And she said, well, I know you're trying to save money, to squeeze the cost there, because that's what procurement guys do. But you don't have to worry about it because these guys haven't raised our prices in 8 years. So that sounded fine to me, but I didn't really know much about background checks at that time. So then I went to the vice president of HR, Human Resources, and I said, hey, tell me a little bit about this vendor. And he said, oh, we love those guys. They do a great job. And you know what's really great about them? And I said, what? And he said, they haven't raised their prices in 8 years. Now you're chuckling, and something about hearing the same word the second time made my spidey senses tingle a bit, I think.
Yeah.
I found out he didn't really know much more about background checks than I do. I'm talking about the vice president of HR. And so he agreed, after some discussion, that we could go out to the field and essentially go shopping. We'd do a little sourcing exercise to see what was out there in the marketplace, whether we were getting a fair price or whether there was a better product. Now, to make this story short, what we found was that we could get a better product for slightly less than half what we were paying. So So that means instead of spending $1 million a year, we were spending less than $500,000 a year. Now, I love this story as a procurement guy, right? Because I kind of get to ride in and be the hero and bring home some big savings. But if you flip that around, being overpaid by millions of dollars over a number of years, and why was it? What was the reason? It was really because we had this false idea that because they haven't raised our prices, we were getting a good price. Because somebody had the idea that, well, if they haven't raised our price, right, if things aren't going up, then it's probably really good. Now, that turned out to be a very expensive sentence.
Yeah, so Jack, you mentioned false idea. Okay, so how do you recognize if you're saying something that may, embody a false idea? How does the business owner recognize it, or those like me who are providing counsel to a business owner? How can I recognize, and how can they recognize if they've just said something that has a false idea in it?
Well, Pat, that's a great question, and it's really an important question because I want to stress to your listeners that these expensive sentences are all around us, and that's what I found at my employer, but I've also found that at a lot of other companies I've worked with, both large and small. And they're things like, oh, they're the best ones in the business. Or nobody else has that technology. Nobody else has that relationship, whatever it is. Or, oh, yeah, that's the CEO's pet vendor. We're always going to work with them. There are a lot of these different flavors of expensive sentences. And a lot of times they come under the guise of wisdom. Like, here's one you hear a lot. You get what you pay for, right? Now, that can be true, but it's certainly not always true. Or you can't change horses in midstream. We're already partway down the aisle with this vendor, so let's just keep going, right? It's too late to change. You hear that a lot, too. Mm-hmm. Too late to change now. So what I realized is that there are three conditions that are the hallmarks of an expensive sentence. And I think if your listeners will be on lookout for these three words, they'll be able to tell whether a sentence is expensive or not. And those are scarce, special, and stuck. And more specifically, is something scarce, is someone special, or are you stuck? Now, in any one of those situations, you're going to be paying more than you need to in one way or another. Maybe it's money, maybe it's time, maybe it's opportunity, maybe it's attention, but scarce, special, and stuck are going to cost you.
Okay, so hey, Jack, here's something that we hear often. One of our big challenges is encouraging a sense of urgency around planning for an exit. And so one of the things that we often hear is, I'm not ready to exit yet. I'll begin planning when I'm ready. Could you put that into one of those categories of scarce, special stuff?
Pat, I'm guessing that that's something you also hear occasionally is, hey, that's a great idea, Pat. I know it'd be good to work with you, and you're a good guy, but we're too busy to deal with that right now.
Yes.
We got to put out some fires this month, right? We just got to get our revenue to the next level this year. We've got to deal with our products here. We've got to deal with some people stuff. And when we take care of all that, then we can think about exit planning. Yeah, we do.
And those are legitimate comments or responses. As you know, running a business is full of that kind of stuff.
It's full of that kind of stuff, but we need to think about it. Whenever we face scarcity of time, right, which means, yeah, we're stuck. We'd like to do that, but we can't do it now. That's a form of a stuck, expensive sentence. And what you want to consider then is the full cost and the full value. So one thing we want to do is step back and look at our time and say, okay, are we really having a realistic expectation and accounting for how much time this is going to take, this project, right, going through this process, whether it's exit planning or whether it's, installing a new system or whether it's going to hire a new person. All of those things are investments of time. And what we want to really consider is that accurate investment of time versus the value it's going to bring. Because we're making those decisions all day long about everything, about how to allocate our time. Our time is finite. A lot of times our time is a lot more scarce than our money. So we do need to think about how we want to allocate that, but it's always important to think about the value on the other side. And one more thing I'll add to that, and we talk about this in the book because I'm too busy to look at it now. That's one of the chapters in the book, because time, famine, and scarcity are such a pressing problem for so many of us. But, it takes money to make money. That's the old business expression. Also, it takes time to make time. And it's quite often that by investing a little bit of time, we can actually free up ourselves. So whenever we find ourselves in that too busy spot, we want to step back and make sure that we're too busy in a way that's really being the most constructive for us in terms of our long-term goals.
So our listeners should be on the lookout for scarce, special, and stock, and we can help our business owner clients avoid the consequences of expensive sentences by clearly quantifying the results from the investment of time and clarifying the full cost and full value.
I think that's a really effective way to have that conversation, Pat. But what I'd also say, so often extended sentences are cured by getting out of the moment and looking really at the long term, or looking at the results that you're aiming for. And so one great benefit that you have in your discussions, because you're talking about exit planning, is because you, by definition of your work, are asking the question, hey, what's the long-term goal? What is this all about? What are we aiming at here? And I think that can really help people get the right perspective so they can get out of today's pressing problems, escape the urgency of the moment, and really focus on what's important.
Jack, it seems like what's essential to break free from expensive sentences is you need to be clear on what you know now, the facts, reality, what you have currently, a quantification of your resources, and then not being controlled by past decisions. Is that right?
Well, you said a lot there, because a lot of expensive sentences really come out of this idea that we're doomed, in a sense, or we're contained by the decisions we've made in the past. The first chapter in the book is it's too late to turn back now. That's the expensive sentence. Now, we see that in the business context, but some of us also see that in personal context, whether it's a relationship or a career that somebody's in for too long or a job that they're in for too long. I tell the story in the book about Napoleon's march into Moscow in 1812. Now, the interesting thing about that march, which is looked back in retrospect as one of the greatest disasters of military history, if not the greatest, because they started with over 400,000 troops heading out to Moscow. They were less than halfway there, and they'd already lost over half of the soldiers to desertion, to death, to war, to famine. And yet they made the decision to keep on going forward. Now, they did stop, and they had some discussions there, and not all the generals were on the same page. But the argument that carried the day was, hey, we've made our decision, we've come this far, it's too late to turn back now. And what that led to was the death of another couple 100,000 troops, so that they returned with about 2%.
Okay, so one more question, Jack, and then we'll wrap up. We're about 20 minutes in, but this is just so good, and I think it's going to be so helpful to the folks listening. Same situation, right? We're with a business owner, and we're doing an evaluation or an assessment of the value drivers that's going to drive the value of the business. And we start looking at operating systems, and they tell us, well, yeah, it's not doing everything that we want it to do, but we put so much money into it 3 years ago, and we just want to get another lap or 2 or 3 out of it. We put so much money into it. It's not everything that we wanted it to be, but how would you respond to that? What category would you put that in? Scarce, stuck, special?
Well, it may be stuck because you feel like you can't sort of change the future based on the past. Sometimes we stick with those systems because we feel like, well, it's the only system that will do the job, and that it's kind of special in that sense. But there's a pretty quick analysis to tell you whether you're doing something the right way. Now, this applies, Pat, if you're talking about hiring an employee or keeping an employee, if you're talking about keeping an old system in place or changing it, maybe it's an IT system, or if you're talking about just adopting a new way of doing the job. And there are 2 simple questions. When you look at how you're doing it now, you need to ask 2 questions. One, knowing everything that we know now, is this the way we designed it if we were starting from scratch? Mm-hmm. Or to put that in a different context, knowing everything we know now, is this the person we'd hire for the job? And that's very illuminating, and you need to start with that baseline, because the past Yes, it got you where you are, but it's really kind of irrelevant when you talk about moving toward the future. Now, the second question is, if a well-funded competitor came to town and was trying to steal our market share, would they do it this way? Would they use this system? Would they follow this business process? Would they hire this person for this job? And that can also be a little scary, but it's very helpful in helping you diagnose, look, are we really doing this because it's the best way to do it, because it's the best approach? Or are we somehow kind of living with this hangover from the past that's holding us back from becoming all that we can be? And when you're talking to your clients about positioning their business for the best exit, and so that somebody from the outside will really see that and see that as something that they want to buy and want to invest in, I think those questions are absolutely critical.
Well, Jack, I'm very excited about your book. I've enjoyed all your books. I think this is my favorite. Congratulations again on it. I think you're going to sell millions of copies. And thanks again for coming. Would you have any last parting statements to anyone who's listening? And feel free to give a commercial for your consulting or whatever you want to give a commercial for.
Well, what I'd say is, my mission with the book, Pat, and I hope I do sell millions of copies, what I'm really aiming to do is get the phrase expensive sentence into the mainstream. And what I challenge business CEOs and owners to do is to invite their team to ask the question, hey, is that an expensive sentence? And the next time they hear a statement from somebody on their team, or they say something out loud themselves, just to be able to say, hey, now, maybe that's true, but on the other hand, is that an expensive sentence? And could that sentence in this context be something that maybe is costing us money or closing off opportunities? And should we think about it another time? Because giving those assumptions a second look and a second thought can often make a huge difference in your company. And if your team knows that you invite that, it can really change the culture.
Okay, so if they want to buy your book, Amazon.com, what's the best way?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, it's online, it's in the stores. So, and if they want a bunch of copies for their team, they should send me an email, jack@jackquarles.com, and I'll give them a bulk discount, especially if they say you're your friend, Pat.
All right, terrific. And if they want to contact you to be a speaker or consulting on expensive sentences, they'd contact you in the same way?
Yeah, that's right. jack@jackquarles.com, that works. And you and I will be in touch, too, so they can always track you down if they can't find me directly.
Okay, thanks, Jack, and thank you, listeners. Please let us know if there's anything that we can do to serve you in planning your exit. In the meantime, consider checking out nslp.com. Thank you. Goodbye.